The afternoon sun filtered through stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Chapel, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors. 200 guests sat in perfect rows, their whispered conversations creating a gentle hum of anticipation. At the altar, Nathan Wells stood tall in his charcoal suit, jaw set with determination that had built his empire. Beside him, Sabrina Hale glowed in ivory silk, one hand resting protectively over her barely visible bump. This was supposed to be the perfect wedding. The successful CEO finally finding love again. The beautiful bride carrying his child. A fairy tale ending that would silence doubters and secure the family legacy. But fairy tales, as 9-year-old Chloe Wells was about to prove, don't always unfold the way adults expect them to. From her seat in the back row, squeezed between Aunt Eleanor's imposing frame and the chapel wall, Chloe's small hands gripped the armrest until her knuckles turned white. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the minister open his leather-bound book. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice echoing through the sacred space, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Nathan and Sabrina in holy matrimony." Chloe's mind raced. The evidence was burning in her pocket. A USB drive that contained everything. The fake ultrasound, the staged pregnancy, the web of lies that had fooled everyone, including Uncle Nathan. "Marriage is not to be entered into lightly," the minister continued, "but reverently, discreetly, advisedly, and in the fear of God." Fear. That's what Chloe felt now. Not of God, but of what would happen if she stayed silent. Of watching her uncle marry a woman who was using him. Of seeing the only family she had left built on a foundation of deceit. The minister's next words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. "If any person can show just cause why they may not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The chapel fell silent. 200 people held their collective breath. And in that moment of perfect silence, a small voice broke through like thunder. "She's lying about the baby." The massive oak doors burst open with a bang that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Every head turned as Chloe Wells, all 4 feet and 60 pounds of her, ran down the center aisle with the determination of a warrior charging into battle. Her Mary Jane shoes slapped against marble. Her carefully curled hair flew behind her like a banner. Her white dress, the one she'd been forced to wear as the perfect little flower girl, billowed around her small frame as she ran toward the altar with everything she had. "She's lying about the baby," Chloe shouted again, her voice carrying to every corner. "Uncle Nathan, she's not really pregnant." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps echoed through the congregation. Someone screamed. Programs fluttered to the floor as guests half rose from their seats, unsure whether to intervene or simply witness the drama unfolding before them. At the altar, Nathan's face went white as parchment. His eyes, usually sharp with business acumen, widened in shock and confusion. "Chloe, what are you?" "Nathan, control your niece." Aunt Eleanor's voice boomed from the back as she struggled to her feet, her face purple with rage. "This is exactly what I warned you about. Children have no place in adult affairs." But Chloe wasn't listening to her gray tant's protests. She reached the altar, breathless and flushed, her small hands shaking as she looked up at the man who had taken her in after her parents died. The uncle who had given her a home, but never quite learned to give her his heart. "Uncle Nathan," she panted, her voice smaller now, but no less determined, "I have proof. She's been lying to you. To everyone." Sabrina, who had been frozen in shocked silence, suddenly swayed on her feet. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the pallor that crept across her cheeks, but she rallied quickly, placing a trembling hand over her heart. I don't understand," Sabrina whispered, her voice thick with tears that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Why would she say such terrible things? I would never. We're going to be a family." The congregation began to murmur, voices rising in sympathy for the bride and disapproval for the disruption. Some called for the child to be removed. Others demanded to know what proof she claimed to have. Aunt Eleanor's footsteps echoed like gunshots as she marched down the aisle, her face a mask of fury and embarrassment. At 63, Eleanor Wells had commanded respect in every room she entered for decades. She was old money, old values, and old-fashioned authority wrapped in a steel-gray dress suit. "Chloe Eleanor Wells," she hissed, using the child's full name like a weapon. "You will return to your seat this instant." But Chloe didn't move. She stood her ground at the foot of the altar, her small chin raised in defiance, even as her whole body trembled with the magnitude of what she'd just done. "No," Chloe said, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "Not until Uncle Nathan hears the truth." Eleanor's eyes flashed with something darker than anger. It was contempt, pure and simple. "The truth? The truth is that you're a jealous, attention-seeking child who can't bear to see your uncle happy. You've been nothing but trouble since the day you arrived, and now you're trying to destroy the one good thing that's happened to this family." The words hit Chloe like physical blows. She felt the familiar sting of tears behind her eyes, the crushing weight of being labeled as difficult and problematic by the adults who were supposed to protect her. But this time, the hurt was accompanied by something else, a burning sense of injustice that gave her strength. "I'm not jealous," Chloe said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm trying to help. She's been lying to Uncle Nathan, and I can prove it." Sabrina, who had been standing silently beside Nathan, suddenly stepped forward. Her performance was masterful, the perfect picture of a wounded, pregnant woman under attack. She pressed one hand to her stomach while the other reached for Nathan's arm. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion, "I don't know why she's doing this to us. To our baby. I feel faint." The reaction from the congregation was immediate. Several women in the front rows made sympathetic noises. Someone called for a chair. An elderly man near the back shouted that the child should be removed immediately. Nathan felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on him. But as he looked down at Chloe's upturned face, something in her eyes gave him pause. It was the look of someone who had seen something terrible and was desperate to be heard. "Eleanor," Nathan said quietly, his voice cutting through the chatter, "let her speak." The chapel fell silent again. Eleanor's face went rigid with shock and indignation. "Nathan, you cannot be serious. This child has disrupted your wedding, insulted your bride, and caused a scene that will be gossip fodder for months. She needs to be disciplined, not encouraged." "Let her speak," Nathan repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Chloe felt a surge of gratitude, so powerful it nearly knocked her over. For the first time since her parents died, an adult was choosing to listen to her instead of dismissing her. "Thank you, Uncle Nathan," she whispered, then turned to face the congregation. Her voice was small but clear as she spoke to the sea of faces staring back at her. "3 days ago, I saw Miss Sabrina coming out of a building downtown. She was with a man I didn't recognize, and she was handing him money. A lot of money. I thought it was strange, so I asked Tina to help me find out what the building was." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice sharp with authority. "Tina, you involved that girl in your little conspiracy? This is exactly what I warned you about, Nathan. Give a child too much freedom, and they'll try to run your entire life." But Nathan held up a hand for silence, his attention focused entirely on his niece. "What did you find out, Chloe?" Chloe took a deep breath, her small hands fishing in her pocket for the USB drive. "The building is a place that makes fake medical documents. Fake ultrasounds, fake blood tests, fake everything. And I have video of Miss Sabrina paying them to make her fake pregnancy papers." The chapel erupted in chaos. Voices rose in outrage, disbelief, and shock. Some people demanded to see the evidence immediately. Others insisted the child was lying or had been manipulated. Through it all, Sabrina stood perfectly still, her face a mask of hurt and confusion. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible above the din. "Why would she make up such terrible lies about me? About our baby?" Eleanor's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Because she's a disturbed child who has never accepted that she's not the center of the universe. She's jealous of you, Sabrina. jealous that Nathan has found happiness with a real woman who can give him what she never could, a family. The words hung in the air like poison. Chloe felt them settle into her chest, heavy and dark. For a moment, she wavered. Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe she was just a jealous, difficult child who caused nothing but problems. But then she remembered the video on the USB drive, the fake ultrasound images, the evidence that couldn't be explained away by adult authority or clever words. "I'm not making it up," Chloe said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And I'm not jealous. I just don't want Uncle Nathan to be hurt by someone who's lying to him." She pulled the USB drive from her pocket and held it up for everyone to see. "The proof is right here. If Miss Sabrina is really pregnant, then she won't mind if we look at it together." Nathan stared at the small device in his niece's hand. His rational mind told him that this was impossible, that children made up stories, that Sabrina was carrying his child and planning to build a life with him. But another part of him, the part that had learned to trust his instincts in business, whispered that something wasn't right, that the timing of the pregnancy had been too convenient, that Sabrina's reluctance to involve his personal doctor had been too easily explained away. "Nathan," Sabrina whispered, her voice breaking, "you can't seriously be considering this. She's a child. She doesn't understand what she's saying." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice commanding and final. "This has gone far enough. Nathan, you will not allow this wedding to be destroyed by a child's fantasy. Chloe will return to her seat, and we will continue with the ceremony." The moment stretched between them. Uncle and niece, authority and truth, the weight of adult expectations against the clear vision of a child who refused to be silenced. From the back of the chapel, a new voice cut through the silence. Young, determined, and completely unexpected. Chloe's telling the truth. Every head turned as Tina Martinez stepped forward from where she'd been standing near the chapel doors. At 26, Nathan's personal assistant had always been the picture of professional discretion. She kept his schedule, managed his calls, and never involved herself in his personal life. Until now, Tina walked down the aisle with quick steps, her heels clicking against marble. In her hand, she carried a manila folder thick with documents. "Mr. Wells," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal, "I need to show you something." Eleanor's face turned crimson with rage. "This is preposterous. Nathan, you cannot allow your employees to participate in this circus." But Nathan was already reaching for the folder, his business instincts finally overriding his emotional confusion. "What is it, Tina?" Tina opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs, clear, high-resolution images that made Sabrina's face go white as snow. "These were taken 3 days ago outside the Riverside Medical Services building," Tina explained, her voice carrying clearly throughout the chapel. "The same building that was shut down last month for providing fraudulent medical documents." The first photograph showed Sabrina in a black coat and sunglasses, clearly recognizable despite her attempt at disguise. The second showed her handing a thick envelope to a man in a white coat. The third captured her leaving the building with a folder in her hands. Nathan's hands trembled as he looked at the images. "I don't understand. Sabrina, what were you doing at this place?" Sabrina's performance was flawless. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photographs, her face a picture of confusion and hurt. I don't know what this is," she whispered. "Those pictures could be of anyone. And even if they are of me, maybe I was just asking for directions or—" "There's more," Tina said quietly, pulling out another document. "This is a copy of the ultrasound image that Miss Hale showed you as proof of her pregnancy." She held up the familiar image, the grainy black and white picture that had convinced Nathan he was going to be a father. Beside it, she placed an identical image with a different name at the top. "This is the same ultrasound image, purchased from a stock photo website 3 months ago. It's been used in fake pregnancies across the country." The chapel erupted in gasps and shocked whispers. Someone near the front called out, "Oh my God," while others began murmuring about fraud and deception. But Eleanor wasn't finished fighting. She strode forward, her voice booming with authority and indignation. "This is clearly a setup," she declared, pointing an accusing finger at both Tina and Chloe. "Anyone could have fabricated these documents. Anyone could have hired actors to stage these photographs. This is nothing more than a conspiracy to destroy this family." With a sudden, violent motion, Eleanor snatched the documents from Nathan's hands and began tearing them apart. Paper scattered across the marble floor like confetti as she shredded the evidence with fury. "There," she said, breathing heavily. "Problem solved. Now we can continue with the wedding and forget this nonsense." But Chloe had been expecting this moment. She'd learned, in her 9 years of life, that adults often tried to make inconvenient truths disappear simply by destroying them. That's why she'd come prepared. "That's okay, Aunt Eleanor," Chloe said, her voice calm and steady. "I made copies." From her small purse, she pulled out several more sets of documents, each one carefully printed and organized. But more importantly, she pulled out a tablet computer, one of the devices Nathan had given her for schoolwork. "And I have the video too," she added, holding up the device so everyone could see the screen. The chapel fell silent as Chloe touched the play button. The tablet speakers, small but clear, filled the sacred space with the sound of Sabrina's voice. "I need the full package," Sabrina could be heard saying on the recording. "Ultrasound images, blood test results, and a doctor's note confirming the pregnancy. I'm willing to pay whatever it costs." The man's voice was equally clear. "For this level of documentation, including the staged ultrasound session, we're looking at $5,000. "Done," Sabrina replied without hesitation. The video continued, showing Sabrina counting out cash and discussing the timeline for the fake documents. It was damning, undeniable evidence that couldn't be torn up or dismissed as a child's imagination. Nathan's face went through a series of emotions: shock, disbelief, hurt, and finally, a cold fury that his business rivals would have recognized. This was the expression he wore when he discovered betrayal in his corporate dealings. "Sabrina," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "explain this." But Sabrina's composure was finally cracking. The tears that had come so easily during her performance now seemed forced and desperate. Her hand shook as she reached for Nathan's arm. "Nathan, you have to believe me. I don't know how they got this video. It could be fake, or taken out of context, or—" "The timestamp is from 3 days ago," Tina interrupted, her voice clinical and precise. "The same day you told Mr. Wells you had a doctor's appointment that he couldn't attend because of privacy policies." The evidence was mounting like a wall around Sabrina, and she could feel it closing in. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not when she was so close to securing Nathan's fortune. "This is all circumstantial," she said, her voice growing stronger with desperation. "Anyone could have edited this video. Anyone could have paid someone to pretend to be me. Nathan, you know me. You know I would never lie to you about something this important." But Nathan was no longer looking at her with love or even confusion. He was looking at her with the cold, calculating gaze of a CEO who had just discovered a massive fraud in his company. "If you're pregnant," he said quietly, "then you won't mind taking a pregnancy test right now, in front of witnesses." The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Sabrina's face went pale, then flushed, then pale again as she searched desperately for an escape route. I already took one this morning," she stammered. "You saw the results." "I saw a piece of paper," Nathan corrected. "I want to see you take the test." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice rising with panic as she saw her carefully laid plans crumbling. "Nathan, this is ridiculous. You cannot subject your bride to this humiliation based on the word of a child." But Chloe had one more piece of evidence, the most damning piece of all. "Uncle Nathan," she said quietly, "ask her about the blood test result from Dr. Martinez's office." Nathan's eyes sharpened. "What about them?" Chloe pulled out one final document, a laboratory report with official letterhead and stamps. "This is the real blood test from Dr. Martinez's office, the one that shows she's not pregnant. Miss Sabrina paid someone to give you fake results." The chapel exploded in chaos. Voices rose in outrage and disbelief. Some guests demanded to see the evidence for themselves. Others called for the police. A few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of the deception that had been unveiled. Through it all, Nathan stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the woman he had almost married. The woman who had manipulated his grief, his loneliness, and his desire for family into a weapon against him. "Get out," he said quietly. Sabrina didn't move. "Nathan, please, let me explain. Get out." His voice echoed through the chapel with the force of a thunderclap. The chapel had become a battlefield of emotions, with Nathan standing at the center of a storm that threatened to destroy everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and family. Sabrina's face had gone from pale to ashen, her carefully constructed mask of innocence finally beginning to crack under the weight of mounting evidence. But Eleanor wasn't finished fighting. She'd invested too much in this wedding, in the idea of Sabrina as the perfect wife who would finally give the Wells family the heir it needed. "Nathan," Eleanor said, her voice taking on the tone she'd used to command boardrooms and charity committees for decades. "You are allowing yourself to be manipulated by a troubled child and a disloyal employee. Sabrina is carrying your child. She deserves your protection, not this persecution." Eleanor's eyes blazed with righteous fury as she pointed at Chloe. "This girl has been nothing but trouble since the day she arrived. She's jealous, attention-seeking, and clearly willing to fabricate evidence to get what she wants." The congregation murmured in agreement with Eleanor's words. After all, she was a respected matriarch, a woman who had guided the Wells family through generations of success. Her voice carried the weight of tradition and social authority. But Chloe had learned something important in her short life. Sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones that sound the most reasonable. "I'm not making this up," Chloe said, her voice small but determined. "And I can prove it right now." Before anyone could stop her, Chloe ran toward the side of the chapel where the wedding coordinator had set up the audiovisual equipment for the ceremony. The large projection screen, originally intended to display romantic photos of the couple during the reception, stood ready to reveal a very different kind of truth. "Chloe, stop," Eleanor commanded, her voice sharp with panic. "This has gone far enough." But Chloe's small fingers were already working with the tablet, connecting it to the projection system with the technical skill of her generation. Within seconds, the chapel's large screen flickered to life, displaying the damning video for all 200 guests to see. The image was crystal clear. Sabrina Hale, unmistakably identifiable despite her sunglasses and dark coat, standing in the office of Riverside Medical Services. Her voice filled the chapel through the sound system, crisp and undeniable. "I need documents that will convince my fiancé that I'm pregnant," Sabrina's recorded voice said. "He's a successful businessman, so they need to look completely authentic." The man behind the desk nodded. "We specialize in that kind of work. For $5,000, I can provide ultrasound images, blood test results, and even a staged ultrasound session that you can show to family members." "Perfect," Sabrina replied. "When can we start?" The video continued, showing Sabrina reviewing fake ultrasound images, selecting the ones that looked most convincing, and discussing how to present them to Nathan in a way that would seem natural and romantic. The chapel was dead silent, except for the sound of Sabrina's voice plotting her deception. Guest after guest turned to stare at the bride, their faces registering shock, disgust, and betrayal. But the most devastating moment came when the video showed Sabrina practicing her reaction to the fake positive pregnancy test. "I need to seem surprised, but happy," she told the technician. "Like I wasn't expecting it, but I'm thrilled about starting a family." The technician nodded. "The key is to make it about love and family, not money. Men eat that up." Sabrina laughed, a cold, calculating sound that bore no resemblance to the warm, loving woman she'd pretended to be. "Trust me, by the time I'm done, he'll be so excited about being a father that he'll sign over half his assets without thinking twice." The video ended, leaving the chapel in stunned silence. The projection screen went dark, but the damage was done. There was no explaining away what everyone had just witnessed. Nathan stood frozen at the altar, his face a mask of devastation and rage. The woman he'd planned to marry, the woman he believed was carrying his child, had just been revealed as a calculating fraud who saw him as nothing more than a financial opportunity. Eleanor's face had gone white as bone. Her carefully orchestrated plan, her vision of the perfect daughter-in-law who would secure the family legacy, had crumbled in the space of 5 minutes. This is impossible, Eleanor stammered. The video must be fake. It's too convenient, too perfect. Someone orchestrated this entire thing. But her protests sounded hollow now, even to her own ears. The evidence was too comprehensive, too detailed to be fabricated. More importantly, Sabrina's reaction spoke volumes. Instead of outrage at being falsely accused, instead of demanding that the video be analyzed for tampering, Sabrina had gone completely silent. She stood at the altar like a statue, her face empty of expression, her hands no longer protectively cradling her fictional pregnancy. "Sabrina," Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper, "tell me this isn't real. Tell me there's an explanation." For a long moment, Sabrina said nothing. Then, slowly, she raised her head and looked at him with eyes that were no longer soft and loving, but hard and calculating. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice stripped of its usual warmth. "Fine, here's the truth. You're a lonely, grieving man who is so desperate for a family that you fell for the oldest trick in the book. I gave you what you wanted to believe, and you ate it up like candy." The chapel erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations. Someone near the back called out, "Oh my God," while others began whispering frantically to their neighbors. But Sabrina wasn't finished. The mask had finally fallen away completely, revealing the cold, manipulative woman beneath. "You think you're so smart, Nathan Wells. The brilliant CEO who built an empire from nothing. But you were so easy to manipulate that it was almost boring. A few tears, some romantic talks about family and legacy, and you were ready to hand over everything." Nathan's face had gone gray with shock and pain. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the complete destruction of everything he believed about love, trust, and human decency. "The pregnancy was just the hook," Sabrina continued, her voice growing crueler with each word. "Once we were married, I would have had access to your accounts, your properties, your entire fortune. A convenient miscarriage a few months down the line, and I'd still be Mrs. Nathan Wells with all the benefits and none of the inconvenience of actually having a child." Eleanor, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally found her voice. "You used me. You used my desire to see Nathan married and settled." Sabrina laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "You made it so easy, going on and on about how Nathan needed a proper wife who could give him children. How that little brat," she gestured dismissively at Chloe, "was just a burden he'd inherited. You practically handed me the script for how to win him over." The words hit Chloe like physical blows. Even though she'd known Aunt Eleanor disapproved of her, hearing it stated so clearly and cruelly made her chest tight with pain. But Nathan's reaction was swift and fierce. He stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet but carrying clearly throughout the chapel. "Don't you ever speak about my niece that way again." The protection in his voice, the clear claim of family loyalty, sent a warm surge through Chloe's chest. For the first time in months, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. Sabrina sneered. "Your niece? The little orphan who's been nothing but trouble since day one? Please, she's not your daughter, Nathan. She's just a responsibility you got stuck with when your brother died." "She's my family," Nathan said firmly. "The only real family I have. And she just saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." The chapel had become a courtroom, with truth and deception battling for supremacy in front of 200 witnesses. Nathan stood at the altar, his world shattered but his vision finally clear. Beside him, Sabrina had abandoned all pretense of innocence, her true nature revealed in all its calculating cruelty. But Eleanor wasn't ready to surrender. The matriarch who had ruled the Wells family for decades wasn't about to let her authority be challenged by a 9-year-old child. no matter how compelling the evidence might be. "This is all very dramatic," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with disdain, "but we're missing the most important point. That child," she pointed at Chloe with undisguised contempt, "has disrupted a sacred ceremony, destroyed a family's reputation, and caused chaos based on what? A few photographs and a video that could have been staged by anyone with a computer and an agenda." Eleanor's voice grew stronger as she played to the crowd, using her decades of social prominence to command attention. "I've known Sabrina for months. I watched her care for Nathan, support his business decisions, and prepare to be a loving mother to his child. Are we really going to throw all of that away because a disturbed little girl has concocted an elaborate fantasy?" Some of the congregation began to murmur in agreement. After all, Eleanor Wells was a pillar of the community, a woman whose judgment had guided charitable organizations and social circles for decades. Her word carried weight that a child's accusations simply couldn't match. But Chloe had learned something important in her investigation. The most dangerous lies often contained just enough truth to sound believable. And she had one more piece of evidence that would expose the full scope of Sabrina's deception. "Aunt Eleanor," Chloe said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands, "asked Miss Sabrina about the blood test she took at Dr. Martinez's office last week." Eleanor waved dismissively. "What about it?" "She took a pregnancy test. It came back positive. End of discussion." "No," Chloe said, pulling out another document from her folder. "She took a test, but she never got the results. Because she paid Dr. Martinez's assistant to throw away the real results and give Uncle Nathan fake ones instead." The chapel fell silent. Nathan's face went white as he processed this new information. "That's impossible," Eleanor said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Dr. Martinez is a respected physician. He would never—" "Dr. Martinez doesn't know," Chloe interrupted. "But his assistant, Maria Santos, needed money for her daughter's surgery. Miss Sabrina paid her $3,000 to switch the test results." Chloe held up a signed confession letter. "Maria feels terrible about what she did. She wrote everything down and gave it to Tina yesterday." Nathan's hands shook as he took the letter. Maria Santos had been Dr. Martinez's assistant for 8 years, a woman he'd trusted with his own medical records. The letter detailed how Sabrina had approached her with the offer, how she'd struggled with the decision, and how guilt had finally driven her to confess. "This is preposterous," Eleanor exclaimed, but panic was creeping in her voice. Anyone could have forged that letter. Anyone could have. She was interrupted by a commotion at the back of the chapel. The massive doors opened again, and 3 people walked in: Dr. Martinez himself, his assistant Maria Santos, and a uniformed police officer. Dr. Martinez's face was grim as he approached the altar. "Mr. Wells, I'm afraid I have some very disturbing news about your fiancé's medical records." The elderly physician's presence lent gravity to the situation that even Eleanor couldn't dismiss. Dr. Martinez had been the Wells family doctor for 20 years, a man whose integrity was beyond question. "The blood test results that Miss Hale presented to you were falsified," Dr. Martinez said, his voice carrying clearly throughout the chapel. "The real results, which I have here, show no evidence of pregnancy. Furthermore, Miss Hale is not, and has never been, pregnant." Maria Santos stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Wells." She said she just wanted to surprise you with the news in a special way. "I didn't realize. I never thought she would use it to deceive you like this." The police officer cleared his throat. "Miss Hale, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to remain silent." But Sabrina was already moving. With a desperate cry, she gathered up her wedding dress and ran toward the side exit of the chapel, her heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. "Stop her!" someone shouted, but Sabrina was already pushing through the side door, disappearing into the afternoon sunlight. The chapel erupted in chaos. Some guests jumped to their feet, craning their necks to see what was happening. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what they'd just witnessed. A few pulled out their phones, already composing messages about the most dramatic wedding disaster in the city's history. Through it all, Nathan stood perfectly still at the altar, staring at the spot where his bride had been standing just moments before. The woman he'd planned to spend his life with, the woman he'd believed was carrying his child, had just been revealed as a complete fraud who had fled rather than face the consequences of her deception. Eleanor, meanwhile, had gone completely silent. The matriarch who had pushed so hard for this wedding, who had dismissed Chloe's concerns as childish jealousy, now faced the devastating reality that she had been completely wrong. "Nathan," she said quietly, her voice stripped of its usual authority, I had no idea. I thought she was perfect for you. I thought she would give you the family you deserve." But Nathan wasn't looking at his aunt. He was looking at Chloe, who stood small and alone in the center of the chaos, her evidence folder clutched in her hands like a shield. Slowly, Nathan stepped down from the altar and walked over to his niece. The chapel fell silent as he knelt in front of her, bringing himself down to her eye level. "Chloe," he said softly, "I owe you an apology. A big one." Tears filled the little girl's eyes as she looked at the uncle who had finally, truly seen her. "I just didn't want her to hurt you, Uncle Nathan. I know you thought I was being mean, but I was trying to protect you." Nathan's voice broke as he spoke. "You were protecting me. You were the only one who was protecting me. And I almost didn't listen to you because I thought adults always knew better." He pulled her into a hug that was long overdue, holding her close as the weight of his mistakes crashed over him. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I let anyone make you feel like you didn't matter." "It's okay, Uncle Nathan," Chloe whispered into his shoulder. "I love you anyway." Eleanor, watching this reunion, felt the full weight of her own failures settling on her shoulders. She had spent months criticizing this child, dismissing her concerns, and pushing for a wedding that would have destroyed her nephew's life. "Chloe," Eleanor said quietly, approaching the uncle and niece, "I owe you an apology too. I was wrong about you. Completely wrong." Chloe looked up at her great-aunt, the woman who had made her feel unwelcome in her own home. But instead of anger or resentment, she felt something else. Pity for an adult who had been so blinded by her own prejudices that she'd nearly caused a disaster. "It's okay, Aunt Eleanor," Chloe said simply. "You just wanted Uncle Nathan to be happy." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I did, but I forgot that happiness built on lies isn't really happiness at all. You understood that better than I did." The chapel was slowly emptying as guests filed out in small groups, their whispered conversations creating a buzz of shock and amazement that would fuel dinner party discussions for months to come. The most dramatic wedding disaster in the city's social history had just played out before their eyes, and they were all witnesses to a 9-year-old child's triumph over adult deception. But for the Wells family, standing together in the now quiet sacred space, the real reckoning was just beginning. Eleanor had remained silent for several minutes, staring at the scattered remnants of wedding programs and flower petals that littered the marble floor. The woman who had commanded respect and obedience for decades now faced the humbling reality that her judgment had been catastrophically wrong. "Nathan," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know how to apologize for this. I pushed you toward her. I dismissed Chloe's concerns. I nearly cost you everything." Nathan, who was still kneeling beside his niece, looked up at his aunt with eyes that held both hurt and understanding. "Eleanor, you did what you thought was best for the family. You couldn't have known." "But I should have known," Eleanor replied, her voice breaking with emotion. "I should have listened when Chloe tried to tell us something was wrong. Instead, I called her jealous and attention-seeking. I treated her like a burden instead of a blessing." Eleanor turned to face Chloe directly, her proud shoulders sagging with the weight of her remorse. "Chloe, I've been terrible to you. I made you feel unwelcome in your own home. I dismissed your intelligence and your instincts because I thought age automatically equaled wisdom. I was wrong about everything." Chloe looked up at her great-aunt, this imposing woman who had seemed so powerful and intimidating. But now she just looked tired and sad, like someone who had realized that all her certainties were built on sand. "I never wanted to cause trouble, Aunt Eleanor," Chloe said softly. "I just wanted to belong somewhere, to be part of the family." "You are part of the family," Eleanor said firmly. "You're the most important part of this family. And from now on, I'm going to make sure you know that." Nathan stood up, his hand resting protectively on Chloe's shoulder. "We all are. This family is going to be different from now on. No more dismissing concerns because they come from someone young. No more assuming that adults always know best." Tina, who had been standing quietly near the chapel doors, approached the family group. "Mr. Wells, I just wanted to say that I'm proud to work for someone whose niece has that kind of courage. She could have let you make this mistake, but she risked everything to protect you." Nathan looked down at Chloe with wonder and gratitude. "She did, didn't she? She risked being dismissed, punished, and rejected by the only family she has left, all to save me from my own blindness." "I wasn't going to let her hurt you," Chloe said simply. "Family protects family." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. This 9-year-old child, who had lost her parents and been forced to live with relatives who barely understood her, had a clearer understanding of family loyalty than any of the adults around her. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "family protects family. And I promise you, Chloe, that I will never forget that again." Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her nephew embrace his niece. "I spent months telling you that Sabrina would make you a good wife because she could give you children. But you already had a child. You had Chloe, and I was too blind to see how precious that was." "She's not just my responsibility," Nathan said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "She's my daughter. In every way that matters, she's my daughter. And I should have made that clear from the beginning." Chloe's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it," Nathan said, kneeling down again to meet her eyes. "I should have adopted you officially when you first came to live with me. I should have made it clear that you weren't a guest or a burden, but a permanent, cherished member of this family. But I'm just a kid," Chloe said, her voice uncertain. "I ask too many questions, and I mess things up sometimes." Nathan laughed, a sound that held more warmth than had been heard in the Wells household for months. "You asked exactly the right questions. And today, your questions saved me from the biggest mistake of my life." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice firm with newfound resolve. "Chloe, I want to make something clear. I've been wrong about you from the day you arrived. I saw you as disruptive because you questioned things because you didn't just accept what adults told you. But those aren't flaws, they're strengths. They're the reason this family is still intact." She paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily to a woman who had spent decades being certain of everything. "I've been holding on to old ideas about children being seen and not heard, about adults always knowing better. But you've shown me that wisdom isn't about age. It's about courage, honesty, and love." Nathan stood up, his hand still on Chloe's shoulder, and faced the small group of people who had witnessed the destruction of his wedding and the salvation of his family. "I want everyone to know," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chapel, "that Chloe Wells is not my niece who I'm taking care of. She's my daughter, and I'm the lucky one who gets to be her father." The words hung in the air like a promise, a commitment that went deeper than blood or legal documents. It was a recognition of the bond that had been forged through hardship and proven through loyalty. Chloe threw her arms around Nathan's waist, her small body shaking with relief and joy. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. Nathan's eyes filled with tears as he held her close. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know." Eleanor watched this reunion with a mixture of joy and sorrow. Joy for the family that was finally healing, and sorrow for the months of pain her blindness had caused. "Nathan," she said quietly, "I want to make this right. I want to be the kind of great aunt that Chloe deserves. The kind who listens to her, supports her, and treats her like the intelligent, capable person she is." "We all want to make it right," Nathan replied. "And we will. Starting today, this family is going to be built on trust, respect, and the understanding that wisdom can come from anyone, regardless of age." 3 hours later, The Wells mansion sat quietly in the late afternoon sunlight, a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted at St. Catherine's Chapel. The wedding that was supposed to mark a new beginning had instead become the catalyst for a different kind of transformation. Nathan had long since changed out of his wedding suit into comfortable jeans and a sweater. The formal attire that had made him look like a successful CEO now lay crumpled in his bedroom, a reminder of the man he'd almost become. Married to a lie, blind to the truth, and distant from the only person who truly mattered. Chloe sat curled up in the oversized armchair by the living room fireplace, still wearing her white flower girl dress, but with her uncomfortable shoes kicked off and her hair loose from its formal curls. She looked small and tired, the adrenaline of the day's events finally wearing off to reveal the exhaustion underneath. Nathan knelt beside the fireplace, feeding wedding invitations into the flames one by one. Each elegant card, with its gold lettering and promises of eternal love, turned to ash as the fire consumed the lies they represented. "You don't have to burn all of them," Chloe said softly, watching her uncle, her father, destroy the remnants of his failed wedding. "Some people might want to keep them as, I don't know, like a souvenir of the most exciting wedding ever." Nathan laughed, a sound that was becoming more frequent and genuine with each passing hour. "I think I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. Besides, I want to start fresh. No reminders of today's mistakes." "It wasn't all mistakes," Chloe said, her 9-year-old wisdom showing through. "I mean, the wedding was a mistake, but finding out the truth wasn't. And you calling me your daughter wasn't a mistake either." Nathan stopped feeding papers to the fire and turned to look at his daughter. The words still felt new and wonderful in his mind. "No, that wasn't a mistake. That was probably the most important thing I've ever said." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with hot chocolate and cookies. The formidable matriarch who had commanded the household staff for decades had spent the last hour in the kitchen, making comfort food with her own hands for the first time in years. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, setting the tray on the coffee table. "It's been a long day." Chloe looked up at her great-aunt with surprise. "You made cookies?" Eleanor's cheeks flushed slightly. "I used to bake when Nathan was your age. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed it." She paused, then added more quietly, "I'd forgotten a lot of things about what really matters." Nathan accepted a mug of hot chocolate, wrapping his hands around the warm ceramic. "Eleanor, we need to talk about the future, about how this family is going to work." Eleanor nodded, settling into the chair across from them. "I know, and I want you to know that I'm ready to listen. To really listen, not just wait for my turn to speak." "Good," Nathan said, "because I've made some decisions. First, I'm going to officially adopt Chloe. I should have done it months ago, but I was so focused on maintaining the status quo that I never made it legal." Chloe's eyes lit up. "Really? You mean I'll be Chloe Wells for real?" "You're already Chloe Wells for real," Nathan said firmly. "The paperwork will just catch up with the truth." Eleanor smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn in months. "I think that's wonderful, and I want to be involved in the process. I want to stand up in court and tell them what an extraordinary daughter you're getting." "Second," Nathan continued, "we're going to make some changes around here. Chloe's voice is going to be heard and respected. When she has concerns or questions, we're going to listen, really listen, not dismiss them because she's young." "I agree completely," Eleanor said. "Chloe, I want you to know that from now on, your opinion matters to me. Your thoughts, your feelings, your observations, they're all important." Chloe looked between the two adults, hardly daring to believe the change she was seeing. "Does this mean I can ask questions about things without getting in trouble?" "You can ask questions about anything," Nathan said. "In fact, I want you to ask questions. Your questions today saved this family from disaster." Eleanor leaned forward, her voice gentle but serious. "Chloe, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you a promise. I promise that I will never again dismiss your concerns or make you feel unwelcome in your own home. This is your home, and you deserve to feel safe and valued here." "Thank you, Aunt Eleanor," Chloe said, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you want Uncle Nathan to marry Miss Sabrina so badly? Even when I tried to tell you something was wrong." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire as she considered her answer. I think I was afraid. Afraid that Nathan would never have children of his own. Afraid that the Wells family name would end with him. I thought a wife who could give him biological children was the answer to everything. She looked at Chloe with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. But I was wrong. The Wells family didn't need more children. We needed to appreciate the child we already had. We needed to see that family isn't about bloodlines or continuing legacies. It's about love, loyalty, and the courage to protect each other. Nathan reached over and squeezed Eleanor's hand. We all made mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. I want to make it up to you, Chloe, Eleanor said. I want to be the kind of great aunt who bakes cookies and listens to your stories and believes in your dreams. Will you give me a chance to try? Chloe considered this, her young face serious with the weight of the decision. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that could light up a room. I'd like that. But can you also teach me how to bake? I want to learn how to make cookies too. Eleanor's face broke into a genuine smile. I would love that. We can start tomorrow if you'd like. Nathan looked around the room, at the fire crackling in the hearth, at Eleanor's peaceful expression, at Chloe's bright eyes, and felt something he hadn't experienced in months: contentment. Not the artificial happiness he'd tried to build with Sabrina, but real, deep satisfaction with his life and his family. You know what? He said, settling back in his chair. I think today turned out exactly the way it was supposed to. Chloe curled up closer to him, her head resting against his arm. Even though your wedding got ruined, especially because my wedding got ruined, Nathan said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Because it meant I got to keep my real family instead of losing it to a fake one. As the afternoon sunlight faded into evening, the three of them sat together in comfortable silence, watching the last of the wedding invitations turn to ash in the fireplace. Outside, the world continued its busy pace, but inside the Wells mansion, time seemed to slow down. For the first time in months, they were exactly where they belonged, together, honest, and finally, truly a family. Evening had settled over the Wells mansion like a gentle blanket, bringing with it a peace that had been absent from the house for months. In the living room, Nathan sat in his favorite armchair with Chloe curled up beside him, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched the flames flicker and fade. Eleanor had settled into the chair across from them. Her usual ramrod-straight posture softened into something more relaxed and human. The wedding dress that had hung in Chloe's closet for weeks, the perfect white dress that was supposed to make her the perfect flower girl, lay in a careful heap beside the fireplace. It had been Chloe's idea to burn it along with the invitations, a symbolic gesture that made Nathan's chest tight with pride. I never want to wear another dress like that, Chloe had said as she pulled it off. It was supposed to make me pretty, but it made me feel like I was pretending to be someone else. Now she wore her favorite pajamas, soft pink flannel with cartoon unicorns that Eleanor had once criticized as inappropriate for a young lady. But Eleanor had said nothing today except, "Those look comfortable, sweetheart." "Dad," Chloe said quietly, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. "Yes, sweetheart. What's going to happen to Miss Sabrina?" Nathan considered his answer carefully. Even after everything that had happened, he wanted to be honest with his daughter without frightening her or filling her with anger she didn't need to carry. "She'll face consequences for what she did," he said finally. "The police will investigate, and she'll have to answer for trying to steal from our family. But that's not something you need to worry about." "I'm not worried," Chloe said, surprising him. "I'm just sad for her." Eleanor looked up from her knitting, a new project she'd started that evening, claiming she needed to keep her hands busy. "Sad for her? After what she tried to do to us?" Chloe nodded solemnly. "She must be really unhappy inside to want to hurt people like that. Happy people don't lie and steal and pretend to love someone they don't really love." Nathan and Eleanor exchanged a look over Chloe's head. Once again, the 9-year-old had shown wisdom that surpassed her years. "You're right," Nathan said softly. "Happy people don't do those things. I think Miss Sabrina was probably very unhappy, and she made terrible choices because of it. Do you think she ever really liked you?" Chloe asked. "Even a little bit." Nathan was quiet for a moment, thinking about the months he'd spent with Sabrina, the conversations they'd shared, the moments that had felt genuine. I think she might have liked the idea of the life she could have with me. But no, I don't think she ever really knew me or loved me. If she had, she wouldn't have been able to lie to me so easily. Good, Chloe said firmly, because you deserve someone who loves you for real. Someone who thinks you're wonderful even when you make mistakes. Nathan's throat tightened with emotion. Someone like you. Someone like me, Chloe agreed, snuggling closer to him. Except, not your daughter. That would be weird. Nathan laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet room. Yes, that would definitely be weird. Eleanor set down her knitting and looked at the two of them with eyes that sparkled with affection and something else. Hope, maybe, or simply the contentment that comes from finally understanding what matters most. Nathan, she said quietly, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Proud of how you handled today, proud of the father you're becoming, and proud of the man you are. Nathan felt his eyes grow damp. Eleanor had always been sparing with praise, believing that too much affection would make him soft. To hear her speak so openly about her pride in him was a gift he hadn't expected. Thank you, Eleanor. That means more to me than you know. And Chloe, Eleanor continued, turning her attention to her great niece, I'm proud of you too. You showed incredible courage today. You stood up for what was right even when it was difficult and scary. That's the mark of a true Wells. Chloe beamed at the praise. Really? I'm a true Wells. You're the truest Wells of all of us, Eleanor said with conviction. You have integrity, compassion, and strength. You're everything this family should aspire to be. Nathan squeezed Chloe gently. Eleanor's right. You are the best of us, sweetheart. And I promise you, from now on, this family is going to be worthy of you. What do you mean? Chloe asked. Nathan took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. I mean that we're going to make some changes. Big changes. First, I'm going to cut back on my work hours. I've been so focused on building the business that I forgot to build our family. That's going to change. Chloe's eyes widened. Really? You're going to be home more, much more. I want to be here when you get home from school. I want to help you with your homework and hear about your day and know what's going on in your life. I want to be a real father, not just someone who pays the bills. Eleanor nodded approvingly. That's exactly what this family needs. And I want to be more involved too. I want to learn about your interests, Chloe, your hobbies, your friends, your dreams. I want to be a real great aunt, not just a stern figure who tells you to sit up straight. Can I still ask questions about everything? Chloe asked hopefully. You can ask questions about anything and everything, Nathan assured her. In fact, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? Nathan smiled. How would you like to be my official consultant? Chloe blinked in confusion. What's a consultant? A consultant is someone who gives advice to help make important decisions. Someone whose opinion matters and whose voice is heard. I'm thinking that before I make any major decisions, business decisions, family stories, any decisions that affect our life, I want to talk them through with you. But I'm just a kid, Chloe protested. I don't know about business stuff. You knew about Sabrina when none of the adults did, Nathan pointed out. You saw through her lies when I was completely fooled. You have good instincts, Chloe. You see things clearly because you're not blinded by adult assumptions and prejudices. Eleanor leaned forward. He's right, dear. Today proved that your perspective is valuable. More than valuable, it's essential. Chloe considered this, her young face serious with the weight of the responsibility being offered to her. Okay, she said finally, but I want to learn about business stuff so I can give better advice. Deal, Nathan said, extending his hand for a formal handshake. We'll start with the basics and work our way up. By the time you're ready for college, you'll know this business inside and out. And if I want to do something else when I grow up, then you'll do something else, Nathan said firmly. The business will always be there if you want it, but your dreams come first. Always. Eleanor smiled as she watched this exchange, marveling at how different the conversation was from the rigid expectations she'd grown up with. You know, when I was your age, children were expected to follow the path laid out for them by their parents. We weren't encouraged to dream or question or explore different possibilities. That sounds boring, Chloe said. It was boring, Eleanor admitted. And it was limiting. I don't want that for you. I want you to dream big and follow your heart, wherever it leads you. Nathan looked around the room, at the dying fire and the comfortable furniture and the faces of the two people who mattered most to him, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely, driven man focused on building a business empire. Today, he was a father with a daughter who loved him enough to save him from his own mistakes. You know what I realized today? He said quietly. What? Chloe asked. I realized that I've been looking for the wrong things. I thought I needed a wife to make me happy. I thought I needed a biological child to feel complete. But I already had everything I needed. I just wasn't paying attention. What did you have? Chloe asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. I had you. I had family. I had love. I was just too busy looking for something different to appreciate what was right in front of me. Eleanor wiped away a tear. We all were. We were so focused on what we thought the family should look like that we couldn't see how perfect it already was. Nathan stood up and walked over to the mantelpiece, where a collection of family photographs had gathered dust for months. He picked up one of the frames, a picture of himself and Chloe from last Christmas, both of them laughing at something just outside the camera's view. Tomorrow, he said, turning back to face them, we're going to start fresh. New traditions, new priorities, new ways of being a family. And it starts with a promise. He knelt down in front of Chloe's chair, holding the photograph between them. Chloe Wells, I promise that from this day forward, you will never doubt your place in this family. You will never question whether you're wanted or loved or valued. You will never feel like you have to prove yourself worthy of being here. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. I promise to, Dad. I promise to always tell you the truth, even when it's hard. And I promise to always protect our family, no matter what. Eleanor joined them, placing her hands on both their shoulders. And I promise to listen with my heart instead of just my head. To remember that wisdom comes in many forms, and that the smallest voice sometimes carries the most important message. The three of them stayed like that for a moment, connected by promises and love and the knowledge that they had survived the worst day of their lives and emerged stronger on the other side. Later, as Nathan tucked Chloe into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes and asked, Dad, are you sad that you didn't get married today? Nathan smoothed her hair away from her face, his heart full of love for this brave, insightful little girl who had saved his life in every way that mattered. No, sweetheart, he said softly. I'm not sad at all, because today I gained something much more precious than a wife. Today I finally became a father. As he turned off the lights and closed her bedroom door, Nathan could hear Chloe whisper, I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart, he whispered back. More than you'll ever know. True family stories isn't about perfection. It's about people who choose to love each other through the imperfect moments. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to think about the brave voices in your own life. The ones who might be small but carry big truths. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of listening to those who love us enough to tell us difficult truths, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the courage it takes to stand up for what's right, no matter how small you might feel.